I never planned to fall for him. Honestly, if you'd told me a year ago that I'd be catching feelings for a guy who used to steal my parking spot and leave passive-aggressive notes on my windshield, I would have laughed in your face. But here we are. It started last fall, the first day I moved into my new apartment complex. I was juggling 2 boxes and a backpack when I saw him. Gray hoodie, backwards cap, AirPods in, leaning against his black Jeep like he was the main character in a Netflix teen drama. He didn't even look up when I parked in what I later learned was his spot. The note showed up later that day, neatly folded, tucked under my wiper blade. "This is 12C's spot. Don't make this a habit." No name, just that. Bold. I should have ignored it. Should have picked a different spot the next day and moved on. But I was tired, a little annoyed, and stubborn as hell, so I parked there again. Another note. "Seriously? I have late shifts. I don't have time for this." I left my own note that time. Maybe try being polite next time. 12B. I didn't expect a reply, but I got one. Politeness doesn't get me my damn parking spot. We went back and forth for almost 2 weeks. No face-to-face interaction, just notes. Sticky ones. Torn pieces of notebook paper. Even a Post-it once stuck to my headlight. Each one more sarcastic than the last. And then one night, I ran into him, literally. I'd just finished a grocery run and wasn't watching where I was going when I turned a corner too fast and walked straight into a wall of hoodie-clad muscle. Bags hit the ground. Oranges rolled. One even bounced off his boot. He looked down at me, eyes narrowed, like he was trying to figure out if I was worth the trouble. "You're 12B, he said flatly. "You're 12C, I replied, just as dry. He smirked. And just like that, everything shifted. After that literal run-in, something cracked between us. Not in a dramatic, movie scene way. It was more like a door creaking open that neither of us had realized was locked in the first place. His name was Jordan. He told me that while helping me scoop my bruised groceries off the sidewalk. "Name's Jordan, by the way," he said, handing me a slightly squashed banana. "Since we're apparently parking enemies and all." I smiled, still a little breathless. "Ethan." There was a pause. Not awkward, just quiet. His eyes met mine, and for a split second, it felt like something real passed between us. Then he shrugged, grabbed his gym bag, and walked away. That was supposed to be the end of it. Just a weird little moment. But from that day on, everything was different. We stopped leaving notes. Instead, we started saying hi. At first, it was just polite nods in the hallway or a casual sup when we passed in the garage. But those quick greetings slowly turned into full conversations. It started with weather talk, complaints about rising rent, the usual filler. Then it turned into real stuff. He told me about his job. He worked nights as an EMT, which explained the crankiness and territorial parking vibes. I told him about mine. I was freelancing as a UX designer, stuck in a cycle of feast or famine contracts that had me half convinced I was always about 2 invoices away from moving back in with my parents. Jordan wasn't what I expected. He was blunt, yeah, but there was this dry humor under the surface, like he didn't hand it out to just anyone. He'd say things with a straight face, and then glance sideways to see if you caught the joke. When you did, his grin would twist up on one side, all slow and smug. One night, after a particularly hellish workday, I was sitting on the curb outside our building with a beer, staring up at the flickering porch light that never got fixed. Jordan came out in gym shorts and a tank, all sweaty from a run, and instead of walking past, he sat down beside me. "You look like shit," he said, cracking open one of his own beers. I glanced at him. "Thanks, I was going for that." He smirked and leaned back on his hands, legs stretched out in front of him. Long day? Long week. We sat there in silence for a while. I could hear the distant sounds of traffic, a dog barking somewhere, the hum of someone's TV through a cracked window. Then Jordan asked, "You ever feel like you missed your shot at, I don't know, something better?" That caught me off guard. I looked over at him, and he was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, brow furrowed, just enough to give him away. Yeah, I said, all the time. He nodded once, and that was it. No follow-up, no oversharing, just acknowledgement, like he wasn't used to someone meeting him halfway. From then on, we started hanging out more. Casual stuff. He'd knock on my door and ask if I had eggs. I'd text him if I needed help carrying up a big Amazon box. Once, he invited me to join him at the gym and almost killed me with a HIIT workout. Another time, I dragged him to a dive bar that had karaoke Tuesdays and watched him silently suffer through 3 renditions of I Will Survive. But here's the thing. Underneath it all, every little hangout, every beer on the curb, every unspoken look, there was this tension. Not aggressive, not obvious, but there, like we were circling something, testing the edge of it. I noticed the way his eyes lingered sometimes when I wasn't talking, or how his shoulder would brush mine and he wouldn't pull away right away. It was subtle but real. And then came the night, everything finally tipped over. It was a Friday. I had just finished a nightmare deadline, and Jordan had picked up takeout from the Thai place 2 blocks over. We ended up on my couch, watching some dumb action movie, half eating, half joking about how unrealistic the plot was. At some point, we stopped talking. The movie droned on in the background, but our focus had shifted. I remember the exact moment. He laughed at something, then looked at me, his expression softening in a way I hadn't seen before. He didn't look away, and neither did I. The silence between us stretched thin, electric. Then Jordan said, almost too quietly, "You ever wonder if maybe we got off on the wrong foot?" I swallowed. "You mean the notes and the passive-aggressive parking war?" He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, that." "I don't know," I said. "We might have needed that to get here." His gaze dropped to my mouth, just for a second, barely long enough to notice. But I noticed, and for the first time since meeting him, I let myself think. Maybe he's not just being friendly. Maybe he's been waiting for a sign. Maybe this whole time, we've both been waiting. That moment on the couch lingered like a pulse between us. I didn't know what to do with it, and neither did he. Jordan wasn't the kind of guy who made impulsive moves, and I wasn't the kind of guy who liked guessing games. But right then, neither of us moved. His knee brushed against mine, and I didn't pull away. He looked down at the contact, then back up at me. "Do you think," he started, then shook his head, like the words came out too fast, too risky. "What?" I asked, my voice low. He exhaled. "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like..." Then he cut himself off again, his hand curling into a fist against the couch cushion. "Forget it." I paused, heart beating way too loud for a casual hangout. "I won't. Just say it." He stared at me for a long moment. And then he said it. "I think about you more than I should." The world narrowed around that sentence. Everything outside my living room faded. The movie still playing, the hum of my fridge, the faint sounds of the city beyond the windows. I was suddenly hyper-aware of everything. How close we were sitting, how his leg pressed warm against mine, how his chest rose and fell like he was holding something back. I could have joked it off. Could have said something dumb and safe. But I didn't want safe. "Me too," I said quietly. His eyes snapped to mine, searching, like he didn't quite believe it. "Yeah?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, pretty much since the first note. Jordan let out a low, breathy laugh and rubbed the back of his neck. "That's kind of messed up." Little bit, then the quiet hit again. But it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was heavy with something new. Something good. "I'm not great at this," he admitted after a second. "The figuring stuff out part." "I'm not expecting anything," I said. "But you're not imagining this, whatever this is." He nodded slowly. Then, just when I thought he'd get up, walk it off, bury it all again, he leaned in. It wasn't fast. Wasn't dramatic. It was careful, like he was giving me a dozen chances to back out. But I didn't. His lips brushed mine. soft, tentative, uncertain. I leaned in, answering him, deepening it just enough to make sure he knew I wasn't hesitating. And when we pulled apart, both a little breathless, Jordan looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Okay," he murmured. That happened. Yeah, we sat there in a bubble of weird, tentative peace. His hand found mine on the couch, fingers brushing before slowly curling in. He didn't let go. That night, he didn't go back to his apartment. We didn't sleep together. We didn't even make out again. We just lay on my bed, fully clothed, limbs tangled, sharing the kind of silence that said more than words could. I felt his breath on my neck, warm and steady, and the weight of his arm around my waist felt like the most solid thing I'd had in months. I thought about the first time I saw him, the guy with the notes, the hoodie, the guarded stare. I never would have guessed this was the same person, but maybe that was the point. Maybe we were both waiting for something to soften. It became a quiet routine after that night. Jordan didn't move in or anything, but he started spending more time at my place than at his. Sometimes he'd show up late after a shift, still smelling faintly like antiseptic and rain. He'd collapse on the couch next to me, mumble something half asleep, and before I knew it, he'd be out cold with his head on my shoulder. I didn't mind, not even a little. It wasn't like we were calling it a relationship. We weren't calling it anything. And maybe that was the problem. I didn't know where the line was, and I didn't want to be the one to ask. There was always this unspoken clock ticking in the back of my mind. Like I was waiting for the part where he'd pull away and say, "This was fun, but..." But he didn't. Instead, we got closer, slowly, in the way that doesn't feel like falling until you realize you've hit the ground. It was the way he started remembering how I took my coffee. The way he'd glance at his phone during his shift breaks and text me, "Still alive, barely." Or the way he'd come in on his nights off, barefoot and hoodie draped, asking if I had any frozen pizza and then making it himself like he owned the place. One night, we were brushing our teeth side by side, both half asleep in boxers and old t-shirts, when I caught him watching me in the mirror. I spit and looked over. "What?" I asked. He shrugged, smiling faintly. "Nothing. You've just got toothpaste on your ear." I rolled my eyes and flicked water at him, and we ended up in a half-hearted wrestling match that ended with him pinning me to the bed, grinning. "You're the worst," I muttered under him. "I know," he said, not moving. Then he kissed me, slow, like he wasn't in a rush to go anywhere, and it felt like everything in my body was wired to that moment. His weight on mine, the taste of mint, the heat in my chest that only got stronger every time he touched me like that. But that same week, the cracks started showing. It was subtle at first, a shift in tone, a moment too quiet. One morning, he left before I woke up, which he'd never done before. No note, no text, just gone. When I finally heard from him that night, all he said was, "Sorry, crazy shift, talk later." Later didn't come that day. Or the next. By Friday, I was pacing my apartment like some cliche in a rom-com, staring at my phone like I could will it to vibrate. Then, just before midnight, I heard a knock on the door. Jordan. He looked exhausted. Still in uniform, his hair damp from the rain. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, dripping in the hallway like he'd forgotten what he came to say. I stepped aside to let him in. Once the door was shut, he finally looked at me. "I lost a kid tonight," he said. I didn't ask for details. I just pulled him in, arms around his chest, holding him as tightly as I could. He didn't cry, but I could feel his body shaking. We sat on the floor of my living room, his back against the couch, my legs stretched out in front of us, side by side in the silence. Eventually, he said, "I didn't want to bring that in here, into this. This is part of it," I said quietly. "Whatever this is, I want all of it, even the shitty parts." He didn't answer, but he reached over and laced his fingers through mine, held on like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. And in that moment, I thought maybe we were both starting to understand what this really was. But nothing stays simple for long, because just when things were starting to feel real, good, Jordan's past caught up to us in a way neither of us expected. The first time I heard her name, it was by accident. Jordan was in the shower, and his phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping. I just happened to glance at it while making coffee. Missed you last night. Call me Sasha. No heart emojis, no kissy face, just her name. But it was enough. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. My stomach twisted the way it does right before bad news hits. The kind you already know is coming. When he came out, towel slung around his neck, I didn't say anything right away. I waited until we were sitting on the couch, both pretending to watch TV, and I turned to him. Who's Sasha? His whole body stilled. There was a pause, just a beat too long. Then he said, she's complicated. I laughed once, sharp. That's not an answer. Jordan ran a hand through his damp hair, sighing hard. She's someone I was seeing. Before any of this. Are you still seeing her? I asked. No, he said quickly. Too quickly. I looked at him. Jordan. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, rubbing his face like he could wipe the tension off. I ended it weeks ago. I just haven't really told her. I didn't expect this with you. I didn't know we were gonna… What? Get close? Sleep next to each other? Make out on my couch and talk about dead kids and feelings? He winced, like I'd slapped him. I know, he said. I messed up. I didn't mean to hurt you. This thing with you. It scared the shit out of me. That made me pause. Because beneath the frustration, the betrayal, the rising tide of what the hell are we even doing? I knew he wasn't lying. He was scared of this, of me, of what it meant to want something he hadn't let himself want before. I'm not asking you to be perfect, I said, voice lower now. But you can't half do this. Not with me. He nodded slowly. I know, you're right. We sat there for a while, silence stretching out, the tension between us thick as wet rope. Then he said, I'll call her. Tonight. I'll end it. For real. Good, I said. But even then, something in me knew we weren't done unraveling. He left that night to go make the call. Didn't do it in front of me. Said he needed space, that it wasn't a spectator sport. I didn't love that, but I let him go. And he did come back, later, quiet. Like he'd left something behind in that conversation he couldn't quite explain. I didn't press him. For a while, things seemed to settle. He stayed over more. We laughed again. He cooked for me one night and absolutely ruined the chicken, and I teased him so hard he threatened to make me eat it anyway. But sometimes, in the middle of a perfectly normal moment, I'd catch him staring at nothing, his body there, his mind miles away, and I knew he was still holding something back. The breaking point came on a Sunday. We were having coffee on the fire escape, legs tangled, sun on our faces, when I made a stupid joke about getting a dog together. Just offhand. Not even serious. Jordan went still, then stood up like I'd slapped him. I can't do this, he said. I blinked. Do what? This. Us. Talking about dogs and future shit. Jordan, it was a joke. No, he cut in. It's not the joke. It's what comes after. I'm not wired for this. I'm not the guy who builds something. I'm the guy who ruins it. I stood too. What the hell are you talking about? He didn't look at me, just stared out across the city, jaw tight. You don't know everything about me, about my past. Then tell me, I said. But he didn't. He just shook his head, turned, and walked back inside. And for the first time since this all started, I didn't follow. Days passed. The silence was deafening. No texts. No knock on my door. Not even a note, though part of me half expected to find one slipped under the door like some poetic callback to how it all started, but nothing came. And I told myself I was done chasing after someone who didn't know what he wanted. But the truth was, I wasn't angry. I was worried. Not just about what Jordan might have felt, but what he was too afraid to face. Then on Thursday, I got a message. "You're right. I'll explain. If you'll still listen." It came at 2:17 a.m. I was wide awake. I opened the door before he even knocked. Jordan looked wrecked. Hoodie zipped up to his chin, dark circles under his eyes, hands stuffed in his pockets like he wasn't sure if he should even be here. I stepped aside without a word. He came in. He didn't sit, just stood in the middle of my living room, like the gravity was heavier there. "I wasn't lying," he said finally, "about Sasha. We were together, yeah. Off and on, for a couple years. It wasn't serious until it was." I stayed quiet. Let him talk. "She got pregnant," he said. "And for a minute I thought, maybe this is the reset. Maybe I could make this work, even though it never felt right." I sat down slowly, heartbeat picking up. "You have a kid?" He shook his head. "No, she miscarried. A few months ago." I didn't know what to say. "I didn't grieve right," he said, voice raw. "Didn't know how. I threw myself back into work. Hookups, noise, anything to not feel it. And then I met you." That hit me in the chest. Jordan looked at me, eyes bloodshot but clear. "You weren't part of the plan." And that scared the hell out of me. Because with you, it wasn't just noise. It was everything. I felt like I couldn't breathe for a second. He stepped closer, voice shaking. "I kept waiting for you to realize I'm just a guy who leaves, who ruins things. But you didn't. You just kept showing up. And I didn't know how to carry that." "You didn't have to carry it alone," I said. "That's the point." He gave a soft, broken laugh. "I'm trying to believe that." He sat across from me on the floor, just like that night weeks ago when he first broke. "But I don't know what I'm doing," he said. "I don't know how to be in this without screwing it up." "Neither do I said honestly. "But that's never been the problem." He looked at me like he was seeing light for the first time after a long time underground. "I want to try," he whispered. "If you still want me." I didn't answer. I reached for his hand, laced my fingers through his, held on. And this time, he held back. Not with panic, not with fear, with presence. He moved in a month later, not all at once. First, it was a drawer, then his toothbrush. Then one day he showed up with a duffel bag and said, "Screw it." We still fight sometimes. About the dishes, the thermostat, his habit of leaving wet towels on the bed. But he's there. We're there. And sometimes I catch him looking at me the way he did that first night he stayed over, when we didn't kiss again, when we just lay there like it was the only place in the world that made sense. And I think maybe, just maybe, we both found something we didn't think we were allowed to have. Not perfection, not a fairy tale, but something real. And this time, neither of us is running from it. Sometimes, I still find the old notes in my junk drawer, the one that said, "This is 12C spot, don't make this a habit." I keep it, not because I'm sentimental, at least that's what I tell myself. But every now and then, I'll glance at it when Jordan's in the kitchen, shirtless, cooking breakfast with that ridiculous bedhead, and I'll think, yeah, I'm really glad I stole his parking spot.